All right, looks like we're live now. Okay, so I know, it's very tough to get all the folks on time. But yeah, because this is all about the AI in CTEM. So can I be honest with you for a second before we get started? Okay. So when I was putting together this webinar, I used AI to help draft the agenda. My team used AI to write the promotional copy, the designs, the social media promotions, and of course, our developers like yours are using AI to ship code faster than ever before. We are all living in this world now. There is no opting out. But here's the question nobody in the AI hype cycle is asking loudly enough. What is all of that doing to your security posture? That's exactly why we are here today. So I would like to welcome the fantastic guests over here. I know that we need to wait for a couple of minutes, but still we can have some candid conversations. But I'm very excited for this webinar because this is one of the hot topics, and we are glad to get some of the eminent speakers, people who have done some fantastic work in the offensive security space. So I'll really be glad to introduce two outstanding guests with us. Ed Adams, a cybersecurity serial entrepreneur, one of the most respected practitioners, and the author of See Yourself in Cyber, which was like the best-selling book and won the security book of the year 2024. And Larry Whiteside Jr., he is a veteran CISO, former USAF officer. He has over 3 decades of experience in information security and risk management. And when I say I don't mean just a number of years, I mean he sat in the chair of CISO, CTO, board across multiple industries, including Department of Defense, federal and critical industry. He has seen the enterprise security from literally every angle. I welcome you all.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, same. Happy to be here. This is a discussion I enjoy having and have more often than you would realize.
Awesome. So I'm just trying to see if we have sufficient people to kick off. It's already 3 minutes, so I think we should continue the conversation around the agenda. Is all about the exposure management playbook, securing your AI-driven infrastructure. So let's talk about the agenda. I will be very quick here. So AI's impact on enterprise applications and infrastructure is something that we will be looking at it. Visibility and validation. So you can't secure what AI is silently building. The compliance pressure that creates for CISOs. Now, AI is used in attacking and defending. Who is actually winning the race? The modern CTEM program in the AI era. And how do you get started with Strobes Playbook? We are here to actually help all the security leaders to understand what is CTEM all about, why Gartner coined this term 5 years ago, and how CTEM has changed over a period of time, and how Strobes are actually helping our customers in securing their assets. That could be APIs, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. All things will be covered in this today's webinar. So before moving forward, I was wondering if we can do a quick poll to really understand, some aspects of the audience over here so that we can construct this webinar much in a good way, okay? So the poll question is, how confident are you that your security team knows what is currently running in your production? So I was discussing with Larry a few minutes ago that AI is everywhere, the Claude Code, your cursor, your whatnot. And there are a ton of different tools out there. So we use AI now today, day in and day out, to build applications, to push code and all. But really, how confident are you? What's running? Does your leadership team is fully aware of what's happening in your IT ecosystem from an AI standpoint? So great, we're getting some great results over here. Very confident, somewhat confident. Oh, it looks like 33% all here. I'm very happy to see 33% very confident. It's not so easy that someone says that they're super confident of what's happening. That means they're very mature in implementing their security policies, governance in place, that they are so confident. Nice. So I think we have a few more seconds. So please, vote whatever you feel is that you're doing. 50% somewhat confident. Cool. So Ed, what do you think about these numbers? Are you surprised, or you thought that this is apt?
I'm very surprised that a third of the audience feels very confident. To be honest with you, very surprised. I was really expecting more folks to answer that we do not measure this clearly. And I am very confident that many folks are not measuring it clearly and just don't realize that they're not measuring it clearly. So that's my initial take on this. I'm happy that folks, a third of the folks think that they're very confident. I fear that they might be a little bit delusional.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. So I too am surprised at the number of people who are very confident, but I thought it was going to be somewhat confident. There was going to be somewhat confident and not very confident. We're going to be about the same. But I think it's in the way the question was framed and the word of production, right? So the word production, many people often have different definitions of what production is. And so when you say what's running in production, do they know? Yes. But the challenge becomes, because of the cloud and how easy it is to spin up, right, systems and things inside of your environment. If you say your environment versus production is the active thing that is likely what's making the business money, what you're actively paying attention to. But it's those other things that you don't actively pay attention to every day. All the marketing tools that marketing uses, all of those tools that they're using to generate content, to identify prospects, the tools that sales are using in order to do sales and sales pipeline. So there are a lot of tools that when you look at production, it may just be this one slim area that people are thinking about versus your entire tech ecosystem. When you think about the entire tech ecosystem, there are a lot of ancillary tools that some may only get used 4, 5, 6 times a year, once a quarter, once a month for reporting. So when you look at that whole ecosystem, that's where we as technologists have historically just fallen down. The big thing, we know that big system, but all these other things is where we tend to be less clear.
That's a great point.
Totally great. All right. So I think the agenda is clear. The poll results are surprising. Well, let's move forward. All right. So I'll start with Ed because, as I said, he has a ton of experience in the application space. So Ed, starting with applications, okay? Now, AI is writing code, reviewing PRs, and shipping features at a pace that no security team can manually audit. So what are the specific application risks that is introduced that our enterprise aren't fully seeing yet?
Wow. So I could talk about this for a long time, but I will summarize it with 2 words: change management. Okay. And change management across your entire attack surface, which goes to in support of what Larry was just saying. If you think about software development and AI writing code and reviewing problem reports and shipping features, yeah, absolutely, it's going very fast. But think about the simple concept of an SBOM, a software bill of materials.
Right.
And for some industries, it's required. Most teams cannot even create these with any type of accuracy or confidence, let alone keep them current with the constant change of code, deployments, configurations, even just a single enterprise application, let alone your entire infrastructure. So this is why, for me, CTEM today it's not even an option any longer. It's a core and mandatory tool that every security team needs to have in their toolbox. And if you think about AI tooling in dev, for example, this, again, in support of what Larry just said, this is now just an expanded part of your attack surface. So ask yourself a couple of core questions specifically about AI tooling in your development process. Have you included AI tooling in your attack surface scope? You should. When uncovering assets and vulnerabilities and misconfigurations during the discovery phases, are you also including the developer desktops? A lot of times they're excluded. The AI tools that they're using on the developer desktop, you should not exclude them. We saw how damaging and far-reaching a vulnerability in the development and build process can be with a SolarWinds attack, and that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So think about how it is today. And another question is, have you validated or tested security controls in your AI dev tools, just like you would a login screen for a sensitive application? It can be exploited just as easily these days. And these are vulnerabilities exploited in your dev process, not in a deployed application. And in fact, when infiltrating a build process, vulnerabilities can propagate to every application that uses these tools. And of course, we know code reuse provides massive efficiency, so everybody does it. But if you're reusing something that's vulnerable, you're literally just propagating that vulnerability everywhere. And it's a very common weak spot, and it needs to be scrutinized closely.
100%.
I didn't want to be the first one to do that, but it's fun. So it's interesting. So at Confide, we run an anti-summit, which is our version of a conference, but that's not the important thing. We do a tabletop at this thing, right? With, 50, 60, 70 CISOs in the room. And a tabletop that we've been doing this year that's based on a real incident that happened is AI being impacted as part of the CI/CD pipeline process, where it then got pushed out into a company's production AI environment that they were using with customers. And it began feeding bad data from that infrastructure, from the RAG. Like it's just so very interesting that you're talking about this, and the developers' machines themselves, and how they can potentially be a threat point that you've got to understand as part of your CTEM infrastructure and scope. And because it's something we're now starting to see that the AI tools that are utilized locally to build part of what you're doing for your bigger project and initiative in your own organization can actually be something that is causing some issues.
Yeah, that's right, Larry. So I have a follow-up question here. So it talked from a technology standpoint about application layer security and all. So you live in the boardroom, right? So the audit committee, the regulatory world, all this, different governance kind of departments you need to manage simultaneously. So here, how is what Ed just described colliding with the compliance obligations? Enterprise CISOs how are you managing both from technology standpoint as well as the compliance and the governance perspective?
Yeah, so enterprise CISOs are struggling at best, right? Because they're sitting on an island in many cases. And I just got off the phone with one that I'm sort of helping. I'm mentoring like 15 CISOs. And I got off the phone with one today who is struggling because to get buy-in, they've got, this person who's responsible for AI and innovation. And that person is just literally keeping them, almost giving them the Heisman and keeping them at bay, because they're trying to integrate some security principles at the ground layer of how we build out AI for their organization, right? How we go to market with new AI tools, how we go meet our customers' needs. And so many CISOs are trying to get an understanding of both their identity infrastructure, their data infrastructure, and then create some baseline just principles of how they go forward with AI. But they're being met with a gate in front of them because the history of security is to restrict versus enable. And so most CISOs I'm talking with and engaging with are trying to change the narrative of how security is seen just from a cultural standpoint, so they can be brought to the table and be at the table as these decisions around AI are being done, right? And I've got a number of CISOs who have basically gone down the pure path of becoming AI governance leaders versus security leaders, so that they can actually show that they've got the skills and understanding to be at the table while these AI decisions are being made. It's a very tough battle that CISOs are dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get it, because hard conversations with your board, both on application layer, infrastructure layer, every sprint cycle, it's not easy, especially in this AI era. All right, so let me move forward with respect to some another interesting aspect of visibility. So let's start with what I think is the most foundational challenge, and I believe it's one of the scariest one, is visibility. Because if you don't know what AI is building in your application and deploying in your infrastructure, nothing else matters, right? Larry, AI agents are now provisioning infrastructure, spinning up cloud services, configuring, access policies, sometimes probably no human in the loop. So as a CISO, how do you even know what's actually running in your environment today?
You don't. They're literally crossing their fingers and hoping. A CISO's role today is more about collaboration and hand-holding than it's ever been before, right? Because back in prior years, if you think about what standing up a system meant, what implementing anything meant, there was a long process because there were physical things that had to be done. You had to get space in a server room. You had to check on, cooling and power. You had to ensure. So you had all these, to Ed's point, these change management functions that happened that you had to go through. Not any longer. An individual developer can create their own agents that are running locally, but have access to all these other things that are just happening, which is why security leaders have gone down this path of, let me get an understanding of identity. I need to understand all aspects of identity across everything we do, because the one thing the agents have to have is an identity. Now, whether they're utilizing the identity of a developer, which we've seen happen, right?
Mhm.
Or they've been given their own identity, getting an idea of that is helping CISOs get some of the visibility, but not stopping it. And so there's this dance that's going on in the industry where CISOs are trying to figure out. I'm watching also a lot of CISOs who are beginning to take engineering on, basically becoming a co-owner of engineering, so that they can get in and start to embed culture, and working directly with, either the CTO or the CIO to ensure that engineering's got a certain culture, and they're giving them the tools that they need so that they can then have the visibility that security needs. So it's a dance for real. Like, CISOs are learning to salsa.
Absolutely. So I want to add something here, because I hear this constantly in our customer conversations. So the number of CISOs who tell me that they don't actually know what AI is deploying in their ecosystem is genuinely alarming. So Ed, does that match what you're seeing on the application security layer or infrastructure layer?
It does indeed. And these days, by the way, everything is software defined. I came out of what we used to be known as the application security world, but we morphed into software security world, because now software is everything's software defined. But what I do want to do is I want to talk a little bit about, I want to piggyback on what Larry was just saying, and talking about things like identity management.
Right.
Where a lot of folks, there's a lot of chatter today in terms of what has changed. And basically what has changed is the tech stack. We've got new toys, and those toys allow us to move a lot faster. But I think it's very important for us to be mindful of what hasn't changed. And what hasn't changed is our collective lack of focus on fundamental security principles, like identity and access management. And AI agents are people too, and they need to have identity management controls around them and access controls around them. But we as a humanity, and pardon me, I'm going to go off on a tangent, but I'll try to keep it quick. Humanity, we have a core technology adoption problem, that we use and deploy new technology faster than we learn how to secure it, full stop. It happened 30 years ago with the web, then again with mobile, then IoT, then APIs, then the cloud, and now AI. But what hasn't changed are the types of threats and attacks that we're seeing. It's still attacking design flaws, misconfigurations, user input, bad identity and access management. We're just able to attack those things faster. So these are things that we were talking about 25 years ago. In fact, James Whitaker wrote a book, one of my favorite books ever, called How to Break Software Security, published in 2002, 24 years ago. And almost everything in that book still applies today, which is just mind-blowing. So I go back once again, because most security teams have no clue what's actually running in their environment. I love to try to paraphrase something that a friend of ours, Larry, Kim Jones, says a lot. And he calls it the Jones maximum, but I'll try to paraphrase it and do him justice. But there's basically 4 core questions that he asks. And every security team should ask themselves this. One, have you done a crown jewels analysis? Basically understanding where the critical data sits and flows, because that's your crown jewels, is your data. 2, do you have a complete and accurate data flow diagram, network diagram, and asset inventories? Almost everyone can say no, but do you have them, and have you validated that they're accurate? 3, how many systems within the infrastructure have a single point of failure? And 4, how confident are you in your rollback plans when something goes bad, patching fails, or you need to restore backups? Now, most organizations, despite their outward attestations and hype, cannot answer these questions with the smallest amount of confidence.
Yeah, I totally get it. I 100% resonate with what you're saying, because I'm having these kind of conversations with the security leaders and CISO, and this is a common challenge. All right, so before we move into the next topic of compliance, so let's do a second poll. So where do you see the biggest AI-driven exposure risk today? applications.
And where is all of the above?
All right, that's a good one, actually. Probably we should have added that. Yeah, applications, cloud, CI/CD deployments, third party. Again, these third party AI tools has become another problem or a headache for majority of the security leaders, because the risk management pre-AI era is different and now it is entirely different. And I don't know how easy or difficult it is for CISOs to onboard any new OEMs or any new products, and what kind of validation that they do before using those kind of, be it SaaS platforms or AI agents. I think third-party risk also will see a lot of change in the coming days. All right. Oh, we're talking about third-party,
Wow.
like 63%.
Fascinating. No one is choosing cloud infrastructure and identity and access management. Wow.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean,
I've got a great and recent story about that, Venu, when the time is appropriate.
Well, but that third-party tools, right? So the reason I think people are saying third-party tools is aligned to what I hear is the lack of visibility.
Yep.
Right? The lack of visibility behind what APIs are being utilized and connected and all of that gives people, what a lot of people don't understand is APIs is identity. That's part of your identity landscape, is the APIs of which you are using to authenticate into other tools, which is creating your third-party connectivity and fourth-party in some cases, right? So if you get a hold or at least some visibility into your identity structure, those APIs will begin to be identified, which will help give some understanding and visibility into that back end of the third-party tools.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I was talking about compliance. So this is for CISOs in this session right now who have SEC disclosure obligations. So this next section is directly for them. You have deep experience in compliance. SEC wants 4-day incident disclosure, right? And similarly, NIST CSF 2.0 mandates continuous monitoring. PCI, again, expects ongoing vulnerability management. Can either of these realistically be met when AI is changing both layers faster than any periodic assessment can track?
So the reality is this is one of the most difficult things, right? And you should add GDPR on this slide, right? Because 72 hours, right? Like the notification disclosure times are so nuanced for everything, right? If you get into compliance, then you got a state for state responsibility, right? Like here in the US, it is one of the toughest things that every CISO deals with. And in order to keep up, because of the rate of change in your business, we used to be able to do things annually, right? We used to be able to do certain things, okay, I'm gonna be aggressive and I'm gonna do quarterly. That's no longer a thing, right? And initially it was, we tried to be ahead of the curve. We have fallen so far behind the curve now. It is, we are miles away. And most CISOs that I talk with, this is a WAG at best, right? Where they are identifying, if they had to report on it, many would literally be off by a significant measure simply because the business is moving so fast, right? And here's the reality. Businesses are always going to drive the truck.
Right.
But what has to happen is security has to start being at least one of the hands on the wheel. And I think that AI is pushing the business to a rate that we're going to end up seeing a major exposure that then ends up walking things backwards just a little, and not necessarily walking things backwards, but giving security a bigger seat at the table. We thought it was going to be SolarWinds, right? And I've had multiple conversations with Tim and the things that SolarWinds has done internally, and they've made some great strides. But the industry as a whole has not. The industry as a whole has really not really given security the seat that they continue to need. And so what CISOs are going to have to do is, in order to keep up with AI, is better adopt AI. I mean, just at the end of the day, because honestly, inside of our corporations, we are more naysayers than the business.
Yeah.
And while the business is adopting AI at an alarming pace, we're sort of like, yes, and okay, but, right? And so we're going to have to hit a point of being able to adopt AI and utilize it as a tool at the same rate as the business. But what that's going to require is the people who are developing AI tools are going to have to be way more transparent on what that architecture looks like, what controls we can actually put in place. We talk about, a human in the loop, right? We're going to need to understand how we architect that and what controls you're giving security practitioners to actually be in the loop and approve and be able to shut down, cut off, stop, or pre-approve things to happen. Because we've seen many stories now where agentic AI bots have done some horrible things. I just read a story yesterday where basically deleted full databases of an organization and justified it based on its own logic, right?
100%. And this is where you said the business is driving the bus. Increasingly, I think AI is driving the bus, and that's a very scary proposition. And things like regulatory compliance and generating reports on PCI compliance and CSF 2.0, those are great tasks for AI, actually. But things like security controls without human in the loop, this is exactly what you're just referring to. This is where it becomes very sketchy and very dangerous. In fact, AI running security tasks without a human in the loop is probably the most dangerous thing I can think of right now when it comes to a CISO's worry chest. And that recent issue that you were just talking about happened this month, April 2026, when Cursor AI coding agent powered by Anthropic's destroyed an entire production database. And get this, in 9 seconds. 9 seconds, the Cursor AI agent, while attempting a staging task, by the way, they're just trying to do it. They found a sensitive API token, executed a destructive command, and wiped out the entire database. Not just the database, backups to the database,
right,
of the cloud
and all under the premise of because it needed to get its job done.
Right. But do you know that the agent actually confessed later on and it actually wrote, quote, "never effing guess." And that's exactly what I did. This is the agent writing that.
Wow.
It said never effing guess. And that's what I did, admitting that it violated its own principles
policy
to fix a credential mismatch. If that were an actual human employee, they'd be fired. So these are the controls you need to put in place around AI agents. And please keep the human in the loop. It's so important. It's trust, but verify. It's an age-old security maxim.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, these are very scary situations. When in 9 seconds, the entire thing is deleted. And I'm, afraid that, these kind of examples will be more in the coming days. If you're blindly believing AI or giving the entire powers to the AI to get things done. I don't think so. We are yet there. Right. So we are almost like 30 minutes done. So we have another few more, 15, 20 minutes more for our webinar. So I know most webinars will lose half of the room by 15 minutes, but our goal today is to be exception. If you're still here till the end, and I'm sure you will be, it means we did something right, and you will surely get an amazing reward. It's a surprise, so I'm going to tell you at the end. It's time for a third poll. Okay. What is the hardest to prove today when exposure risk comes up in board or audit conversation? What changed? What was exposed? Who wants remediation? I'm sure Ed will say all of the above. But the risk is going down. No, again, this is a very, very tough question. So CISOs are always on the hot seat. And, they have to, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, that the fancy dashboards and all that, presented to the board, now I think is outdated. It's more about outcomes. Now the board want outcomes rather than your fancy dashboards. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so the fancy dashboards are fluff now, right? So boards don't want to see that. Boards literally want to understand what is the impact to the company's bottom line. Right. Yeah. Money rules the world. We don't often want to admit that. But at the end of the day, every company is driven if they're public, they're driven by shareholder value. If they're not public, they're driven by the private equity entity that likely owns them, or their EBITDA, which they want to make better so that private equity can come scoop them up. It is the economics of business today is driving all the decisions. So with that, when you get in front of the board, they want to understand how the security functions and outcomes are actually enabling the business to meet whatever its strategic goals are. And if you cannot draw a line to that, you're going to not be there very long.
Absolutely.
But that's also, Larry, I think this is what you and the Confide team do very well. You help organizations drive security at the speed of business. Because if you don't drive it at the speed of business, it's going to get lost or defunded.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. So many CISOs are getting defunded because no one's understanding the value that they're bringing, and CISOs aren't able to articulate it, right? And so this is why I'm mentoring, right? I'm mentoring because I try and help CISOs understand how to build relationships appropriately, but also how to tie their own initiatives to the initiatives of everybody in the business, and then ultimately to the bigger initiative of the business itself, and have that conversation at the board. And I'm actually flying into Houston next week to meet with a customer and get in front of their board to help have this conversation.
Nice. All right. So here, now we discussed about AI going rogue, but there is another dimension to it. And what's make 2026 uniquely dangerous is AI isn't changing how we build applications or deploying the infrastructure or managing the entire CI/CD and so on and so forth, but it's changing how attackers target both of those layers simultaneously. So when I say that, so we discussed about Project Glasswing, Mythos, and different kind of models are there, right? So these models are there with the white hat hackers or the black hat hackers or whatever you call it. So now we have the power of AI, power of LLMs, both with respect to attackers and defenders. So Ed, we have securities over here, attending this webinar. Some of the largest companies are watching the webinar. So Ed, speak directly to them, as attackers are now using AI to scan application code vulnerabilities, find API weakness, misconfigurations, and so on and so forth at a fast speed. And defenders are also using AI to probably monitor and prioritize those vulnerabilities. But what do you think? Who's winning the race?
Yeah, I don't think it's really much of a race right now. I think the offensive AI-powered attacks are outpacing the ability to defend. But I think what's important is to understand why. This is always going to be an arms race, but why? And to me, I'd like to also couple this with the thought of what are some of the most dangerous AI-introduced vulnerability patterns that I've been seeing. Right. And to me, it is 100% at that software application layer. And it's because modern software applications, it's a combination of AI-generated code, human-generated code, deployed on infrastructure as code, and using data stores and databases that are also software-defined. And a dangerous pattern that I've seen in dev teams is not using tightly constrained models for the AI-generated code. Now, AI is marvelous for creating lots of code fast, but if you don't constrain it, you're basically saying to your AI agents, go ahead and use any source code you can find on the internet or go make it yourself. Big mistake. Instead, take the time to carefully curate and vet libraries and routines, and then train your AI model on those. For example, instead of asking an AI agent to go write a Java authentication library, tell it to use a specific Java authentication library that you've already reviewed and you're confident in its functionality and performance and security, not just security. And do the same thing with any sensitive function, like a Node.js login form, to make sure that input is sanitized appropriately, output is encoded appropriately. And then use the AI to write code that's very tedious and not necessarily sensitive, and not the code that is really going to get you into trouble. Basically, make sure that you don't turn your AI agents loose on the whole internet or universe of open source code, because we all know how vulnerable open source libraries are. So to me, that's why the offensive side is winning the race today, but it can be changed.
Yeah. So I love where you went, Ed, and I'm going to say, I don't even think it's a race, right? I don't even think it's a race. It's a Lamborghini versus a Pinto, right? And they are way ahead now. There are multiple reasons for it, and some of which you alluded to. One is, I don't think everyone, including the business, security practitioners know, but the businesses don't know that threat actors are also running businesses, right? And so they're not just random people just out on a keyboard. No, most threat actors are part of organized crime. Like, they're big organized things, right? That's not even talking about state-sponsored stuff, right? So with that, knowing that they are also running businesses, they are doing what they can to be as efficient as possible. So they adopted AI even before we as practitioners did. So they're more skilled in it. They're spending more time in it. So they are way out on that. I love where you went with, we need to learn to use AI to be better at AI, right? So utilizing AI in a way that, yes, okay, maybe you do want to develop and build this thing, but why don't you use it to identify, create a scope, and create a mechanism by which you're shrinking what the AI that you then use, the parameters of which it's going to go out and build this thing and not pull in bad stuff. Because here's the reality. If you don't already know it, there's somebody in your business that's vibe coding something, right, in order to use as their own small application as an individual over their small team to try and be more efficient. I can guarantee it's happening somewhere in your business because it is the most common thing I hear. And I even had a conversation with CISOs around vibe coding. Well, like, why vibe coding? They're like, somebody came up with the word vibe coding, right? And it just stuck. But it is basically people who don't know anything about writing code or development, but because they can just type a sentence into an AI tool and it'll go out and just and build this thing. To its point, it's going to pull from wherever it can as quickly as it can, right, to put this thing together as efficiently as possible. And then now you're going to use it. You're going to connect it to your email. You're going to connect it to your calendar. You're going to connect to all these things without having any clue of what's happened in the back end of it and what that potential exposure is going to be for you.
Amazing insights. So this is going great. I'm so happy that we're discussing these topics. And now let's get practical now. So every CISO in this audience is probably thinking, now, we discussed the problems across both the layers, application and infrastructure. What do I actually do about it? So let's build a program. So Larry, a CISO walks on a Monday morning and says, okay, I need to build an exposure management program that handles AI-driven infrastructure risk and satisfies our compliance obligation. Where do we start? What are the first 90 days that you recommend?
Yeah, so honestly, if you want to start a CTIM program, for me, I tell everybody, you've got to get a handle on what you have. If you don't know what you have, nothing else matters. Like, it's like having a house, right, and not knowing whether you have one bathroom, a half bath, or 10 bathrooms, right? Like, that is extremely important, is to know what you have. Once you know what you have, then what you need to do is you need to assess and prioritize, because at the end of the day, to a point that Ed made earlier, you're going to have some things that are far more important that you need to pay attention to far more closely and maybe assess on a far more frequent basis than some of these other environments, right? And so once you prioritize and you begin to know, okay, I've got these things, this is how I list them out. Now, what are the integrations that each of them has? Because this is where I think we often get lost. We're like, okay, I've got a cup. This is a cup. This cup is important, but you're not paying attention to the straw and where the straw is going, what it's connecting to, right? And so it's understanding that at least the first party, right, or third party components that are connecting to that. That's where you start bringing your identity landscape into the mix. Is getting a hold. Now you know what you have. Now you're looking at what it's connecting to. So now you're like, okay, now I'm getting into my identity and understanding what the identity landscape looks like. And then you start assessing, because as you start assessing each of these environments, it's going to give you a very, very clear picture on what you have, who has access to it, and what's happening within it. Those are some of the key baseline principles that you need to know in order to really get an understanding of what that looks like. Because then later on, you're going to have to dig into the processes on the back end of, right, what's the change management, if there is one? How do these things get updated? But you got to start just by knowing and having some visibility. And there's a question about lack of visibility. This is the thing about getting visibility. I call it the V word all the time, right? Getting visibility is extremely important. But then adding identity and these third parties begins to give context, right? And that's the C word. So those words for me are extremely important as a CISO. And what I tell CISOs, if you don't have visibility and you don't have context, nothing else is going to matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. In fact, one mistake I see a lot of organizations do when they're trying to stand up a program like CTIM is they start by automating processes that they already have in place. And again, it ends up just, if you have a bad process or a broken process, all you're doing is making that bad process go faster. and it's just going to make things worse for you. So don't start with automation, start with asset discovery. And from that point, that's where everything starts. So
yeah, that's where our next topic is all about. So
wow, I didn't even see this. Wow. Okay.
No, I just changed the slide. Larry. So yeah, so CTEM, there are different phases. So I'm sure Ed and Larry, you are fully aware of this, and you 100% recommend the security leaders out there to implement these things. So Ed, would you like to add anything like, how do they start? What is an important thing? And because we have seen that still there are legacy companies doing vulnerability management yearly once or quarterly once, but it's not continuous. So is it practically viable for them to implement these 5 phases?
it is. And the word continuous, and I'll air quote it, is very contextual. Some organizations can move very fast and they can handle even a daily scan across their enterprise. Others, they'll be overwhelmed by the amount of findings that come back and don't have enough AI agents or human eyeballs to actually process and vet those. So it's a very contextual thing. Is it possible? Of course it's possible. These 5 phases of CTEM, and I think this might be taken pretty much straight from Gartner, it's not new. And this is one thing, I love Gartner and the analysts, but frankly, they just put new labels on stuff that we should have been doing a long time ago. And that's what CTEM is to me. None of these phases are new, but what we're able to do is automate it with some fantastic tooling and platforms. I mean, yes, it's possible. And continuous discovery and scanning is possible. It's overwhelming these days with the amount of change, especially with software-defined infrastructure and applications, but it is possible. It's just contextual to your organization. So just be mindful of how fast your organization can go and don't try to push it too fast because you will fall down.
I want to add to this. So because this is one of the things that the word continuous is one of the things that scares a lot of CISOs.
Yeah.
And what they say is, they say, listen, I've got enough on my plate. Don't show me more stuff that I have to deal with, right? Because I already can't deal with what I'm doing. And they think that's what CTEM is going to do, is going to show them more stuff that they can't deal with. And so that's why phases of a CTEM process, right? It's important for you to, as you get more context about not just what you have and your identity structure, and then the processes by which all of the workflows happen to update and so forth. That is where, when you get that context, take a piece at a time. Okay, now that I understand things, this process may be easy, right, for me to implement a CTEM process around because, right, for this application and the identity structure that it has associated with it and its update process, there may be a mechanism where I can actually facilitate an entire cyclical process that identifies, reports, tickets, and then fixes said vulnerabilities or whatever was identified, whatever exposure may have been identified. So don't try. So many people try and just do this whole thing and say, oh yeah, I want a CTEM process and I'm going to run this thing right continuously and everything. And now you've got 10,000 things of which you can only fix 5% of them, because that's the 5% that falls within a process that you can actually automate to sort of keep this fresh. So take it small. Don't try and eat the whole, right? What do they say? How do you, a hippo, right? One bite at a time, right? So just take small bites.
Absolutely. I totally get it. Thanks, Ed, for adding that. So folks, so what Ed and Larry just described about continuous discovery of assets, running scans, risk-based prioritization, compliance, map remediation, board report ready, and all those things as a part of CTEM. I think that's where Strobes has been instrumental in building and operationalizing the entire CTEM into one single platform. So we work with enterprise companies who are facing the similar kind of challenges. And thanks to Strobes CTEM, we are helping to cut down the entire noise, prioritize the vulnerabilities, and helping them to reduce their risk. So in the interest of the other folks who have joined here, a quick glimpse of how we have actually helped our customers in reducing the noise is, they run continuous scans. So, as Ed mentioned, continuous is contextual in place. So it's about volume of vulnerabilities. I totally get it. A large enterprise companies, if they do scans every fortnight, probably millions of vulnerabilities will be there that they need to address it. But the bigger question is about how do you validate it? How do you prioritize it? And that's where, our platform has actually done some magical stuff for our customers, wherein we continuously run scans. We prioritize the vulnerabilities based on 15 different parameters that includes, asset sensitivity, asset exposure, exploitability, EPSS score, and so on and so forth. But apart from that, we also do validation in real time and help our customers to fix the right set of vulnerabilities to reduce the risk. So one of our customers, the mean time to remediation was like 45 days. Now, thanks to Strobes, it came down to 5 days. So that's how impactful CTEM is. But again, it's totally contextual. So where are you in the journey of CTEM is very important. What is it you're trying to achieve? And based on that, if you can implement CTEM in the right way, I'm sure it's amazing results and we can be ahead of these bad actors is what I feel. Before we go to the Q&A, I want to make good on something that I teased at the start. So I was talking about something amazing that you'll get at the end of the webinar. So here you see, you will all will get an email about our exposure management playbook. And not just that, you will be getting a recording of this webinar. Again, not just that. So we are giving away $250 worth of AI credits of the Strobes CTEM platform that you can leverage for multiple use cases. That could be for prioritization, for AI pen testing, could be any kind of it. So guys, so here's the QR code. Please scan, enter your information, and done probably in the next 24 to 48 hours. Our team members will reach out to you, create an account, and give you $250 worth of AI credits that you can leverage it as a glimpse of what CTEM is actually do your organization. And then Larry just told you what's broken. So what are the problems in the AI? Now, with the help of Strobes CTEM, see what exactly is exposed and how you can fix it. Okay. So thank you so much. I think, we will go ahead for the Q&A round now. So thank you, Ed, and thank you, Larry, for this wonderful insights on CTEM. Now, let us, I think we have just about 7 minutes, I think. So we are happy to take questions. So any questions? Let me see if there are
There is one question in the Q&A. It says, from Matthew, it says, how do we solve for the lack of visibility, especially when resources are limited? So this is something I hear a lot, right? We've got limited number of people. We've got limited staff, right? How can I get visibility into all the things that we need, right? And so from a security perspective, right, most of the time, if you want to understand visibility, is you start at your identity infrastructure. See who's got access to things, right? Who's got the most elevated access? And then start with those people. The people with the most elevated access have the most access to things, right? So start with those people. It should be a limited number of people and just start asking them, right? Have a short, question session with them. If you have tools that can help you with this, if you are a Microsoft shop and you've got Copilot built in, or if you're a Google workspace shop and you've got Gemini built in as part of your subscription, if you've got the rights, you can then utilize Gemini and or Copilot to go in and do some audit of that based on it's connected to your IDP. So, but if you're then talking about visibility of your application infrastructure, right, then that's really it's going to take a little bit of work, right, of going and seeing. There's ways to look at, and there are tons of security tools. Listen, I'm going to give everybody a hack. Here's a hack, right? There are so many security tools out there that are willing to come in and do a POC and give you some of that visibility for free. Like at the end of the day, right, if you're a 1 or 2 person security shop and you just need to know, there are tons of security tools that will literally come in and do a POC to help you get an understanding of that just for free in a 1-day pilot and a 2-day pilot, right? Because for them, a lot of this is data that they are gathering about how many people, how many companies they're dealing with that don't have this visibility. So it's sort of metrics that they get to capture and utilize as part of their marketing. So a lot of times they're willing to do this. So reach out to them. If you want to have a conversation with me, reach out to me. These are things that you can easily do. But it happens a lot. There are tons of security teams that have less resources than they need. Actually, most of the ones I know have less resources than what they need.
So Larry, I think someone asked the question in the chat, how are executives engaging with CISOs to address business operation impact due to amount of fake AI generated data to daily operations. Okay.
Oh, read that again.
Okay, let me just copy paste into the questions if you're not seeing that.
Yeah.
It's about fake AI generated data.
Oh, I did see that early. Yeah. Fake AI generated data associated with daily operations. So I'm assuming that I don't know if they're talking about deep fake, right? Where it's deep fake that are impersonating someone, which is becoming a thing of people utilizing AI to generate deep fakes about an executive calling in to say something, right? With deep fake voice calls, that's happening. I'm hearing a lot of that. But if they're talking about AI generated data with daily operations, I'd love to understand that a little bit more. And maybe we have to take that offline, but I'd love to understand that. And I will have a direct conversation with you, Jay. If you just reach out to me on LinkedIn, we can have that conversation directly.
But if you are talking about AI generated data that is either inaccurate or fake or hallucinated or referencing non-existent references, one just piece of advice is always challenge your AI agents. Don't just accept what comes back with them. This happens to me on a routine basis. I'll pose a question or a topic, or I'll give an AI agent a task. It comes back to me and something doesn't look right, and I'll challenge the AI agent. And sure enough, the AI agent has gone and done something incorrect, or has referenced something incorrect, or is using outdated data. That happened to me just yesterday, that the data was 2 years old, and something significant had changed in that organization in the last 2 years, and it was no longer an appropriate reference or recommendation that the agent was making. Challenge your AI agents. They are not perfect.
That's a good call out. That's a very good call out, Ed.
100% Ed. I think any more questions?
Yeah, I see one in the chat. It says the SEC cybersecurity disclosure rules require material incident reporting within 4 business days. As a CISO, how do you produce audit-ready compliance evidence continuously without it becoming a full-time job for your team? Yeah, so that's where a lot of GRC tools have gone down the path of controls automation, where basically they are enabling you via AI to constantly gather data around a control, right? So if you've got a control library or whatever one you're using, NIST CIS, NIST 853, ISO, whatever that control library is, you may have one that's unique to your organization. What you do is with these tools, you can go in and identify what systems that data is being generated through, and then have it set where it's just automatically grabbing that data on some sort of routine and checking the validity of that data, that it's actually still meeting that control. And if it's not, then it'll actually flag it that, hey, this control is now broken. So there's definitely ways to automate that. The industry has evolved in that space. The big question here, though, is with this SEC rule, and I've had a lot of conversation with SEC lawyers at both conferences and just on phone calls with some of their attorneys that I know, and it's that whole definition of material. And so one of the big things that gave a lot of clarity to a number of CISOs is that the SEC has come out and said, you determine what's material. So whatever you put in your 10K or your 8K, and when you say you define the material, that's what we're going to go off of. And so if you've defined it in that way, that's the way you better make the decision. So it's given a little bit of a reprieve for people to be able to define materiality in a way that works for them in the business, but that's what you got to live by.
All right, I think, thank you so much. It's already 11 here in Central. 1 hour done. I really appreciate Larry and Ed for joining this webinar. I think we have covered majority of the stuff around the securing AI-driven infrastructure, because we believe that this is the need of the hour, the way AI is being used in our daily life, be it from development to infrastructure. So we have covered majority of it. So I really appreciate for spending 60 minutes of your time and answering a few of these questions. I hope it was very productive for the audience. Thank you all. Any final notes, Ed and Larry?
Venu, I do. I have 10 words I would like to leave the audience with, and they're polite. So my final 10 words: start with asset discovery and include the developer desktop, please.
Yeah, honestly, I'll say, think of it like you're eating an elephant. Small chunks. Don't try and eat it all at once. Small chunks, because that'll make it manageable. And yes, you likely have a small team, and that's okay. but you'd rather have small wins than a big failure.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate. See you next time. Thank you all for joining this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.